idea of a transition ritual just jumped out of me at the press pause session last week, and it was just one of those many ideas that got thrown in. So I just thought, gosh, a little video on that might be, very interesting. I was certainly interested by it, so I thought maybe people in below the line, you first kind of land, might be interested in just what is that. And I guess in the context of our conversation last week, it was potentially dealing with stressful situations, and that is absolutely an application for it. But I'd imagine there are other applications. So I thought maybe for our latest You First weekly video, we could just go into that for a couple of minutes and talk about that.
Yeah, totally. So I suppose if you think about before, COVID and everything else, before that hit, a lot of us would have had natural transition rituals in place. So when you finish work, for lots of people, they might be driving or getting the bus or getting the Lewis home, and they might read the paper or listen to the podcast or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So you nearly had a natural transition ritual in place there to sort of park the day. Now, I know there's probably tons of people that would continue working on the Lewis or on the bus or whatever.
Yeah.
But the idea of a transition ritual is pretty much, as it says in the name, is just simply to have something that you do that enables you to park a certain focus that you just had, sort of close it off, move on to the next thing. So you could think of transition rituals in a few different ways. One would be at the end of your day. And I think that's quite relevant. I think it's very relevant at the moment with lots of people obviously working from home. So a way of transitioning from your work into, your life after work. The second thing would be, it can be a sort of a miniature version of this, could be done moment to moment throughout the day, just in terms of renewing your own energy. And the third one, as you sort of alluded to, is if you're in stressful situations and challenging situations. So I don't know, would it be useful just to maybe talk through, I suppose, each of those?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So if you think of the first one, and I sort of use a real example, this was a conversation I had with a client of mine a couple of weeks ago. And he's a pretty senior job, very fast paced, it's busy. He works upstairs. He's sort of an office upstairs in his house. So when he finishes work, he's going, straight downstairs, his wife, his two kids, which, he loves, but he's also aware of, I'm nearly dropping in at a different frequency and I'm not fully there and sort of engaged with them. So what we were talking through in that situation was to come up with something. It could be just as simple as 10, 15 minutes at the end of his day. So at the end of anyone's day, and it might be different things that they do just to sort of decompress nearly and sort of try and park the day behind you. So in this case, we were chatting through, literally the idea of shutting the laptop, tidying the desk, put everything away, taking 5 minutes to stretch, just gentle stretching. He spoke about he's got a couple of weights in his room. He might incorporate a few of those. We also spoke about just a little 5-minute meditation. So it could be anything. For some people, they might want to shift the energy, as in literally get out of the house, go for a 10, 15-minute walk. Don't bring the phone, don't bring anything. So there's lots of different things that people can do, but just the idea of, and I've read one research paper on this where they talked about the average time, being sort of 15, 16 minutes is quite useful, because that can often relate to the length of time people would have commuting. And obviously lots of us can have much longer than that commuting. Yeah. So that's just an example of maybe thinking about, especially if you're working in the kitchen or you're in your bedroom or you're upstairs or downstairs or wherever you are, if you're working from home, is just thinking about what can I do just to park my day, so that you can be more engaged, in the evening time with whatever you're doing or with whoever you're doing it with. The second thing then, I suppose, in terms of using it throughout the day, I think you and I, David, we've spoken about this. I know we've spoken about it with clients before, is this idea of sort of resetting every 90 to 120 minutes. And it goes back to sort of, what's known as Ultradian Rhythms, which we have every 90 to 120 minutes during the day. Our brains power down and they start to just naturally become fatigued. So inserting little reset breaks or little renewal breaks throughout the day is a very simple way of just resetting and recalibrating that energy level. So it can be as simple as, you know, at the end of maybe a 90-minute session, take 5 minutes, you know, go outside, stretch the legs, have a tea, have a cup of, you know, have a water, whatever it is, have a coffee, but just disengage from what you're doing. And the idea is that you're coming back into maybe a new piece of work or something different, or the same piece of work, but you've sort of topped up your energy levels, if you like. So something like that is, you could view that in a way as a little transition ritual. So where I'm coming from, maybe a piece of work that's very intense or requires a lot of concentration or focus, and you're just transitioning out then into something else. And then I suppose the third area that we were chatting about was in relation to stressful, you know, and really challenging situations. And that's where, you know, what I mentioned at the start with somebody transitioning out of their day, it might be no different from that, that if you know you're going into maybe a challenging, whether it's a meeting, whether it's, you know, a session, whether it's a difficult conversation you need to have, if you're conscious that, look, you know, there'll be a lot of emotion in this. I find I sort of look at it like a in the session and then post. So I sort of expand maybe the idea of a transition ritual. So I think about beforehand, right? Can I prepare as well as I can for this? Can I also know, and even just bring it to my conscious awareness that, yeah, this is going to be stressful, or it might be challenging, or it might be difficult. So I'm just nearly sort of mentally and emotionally preparing myself to go, yeah, this is going to be maybe a tough conversation, or a challenging meeting. So you're nearly, not so much you're psyching yourself up, but you're just calming yourself into a frame of mind that, yeah, this is going to be challenging. And am I prepared for this? And I've got everything I need, you know, for the meeting, say, if that's what it was. The second thing then is maybe, and this is easier to do, I think nowadays, excuse me, when we're working remotely, is you might just have a couple of triggers or prompts in front of you, just about in the stressful or challenging situation itself. A very simple one is just breathing. And I know it sounds a bit, you know, ridiculous even to say that, but, you know, a lot of people will know that when we get stressed or anxious, our breathing can actually shorten, even without us realizing it. So we know that breathing and our using our breath is a way to move from, you know, the sympathetic nervous system going into overdrive back into parasympathetic. And when we're in that more parasympathetic state, our prefrontal cortex is uninhibited. We can think better, we can think clearly, we can problem solve better. So it might be very simply that when you go into you know, a challenging or stressful situation, I might have just simply something in front of me, just as a reminder, don't forget to breathe, you know, just before I speak, take an extra breath, really try and listen that bit harder, because often in as you know, and I know, and lots of people know, often in stressful situations, somebody is getting triggered. There's something about this that's really bringing stuff up for people, and they might have a lot at stake in whatever the conversation is. So just sort of things that you can do in the moment. And then the last piece of that is just when you finish, you know, maybe that challenging meeting or conversation, is just to build that time in for that little bit of transition. And I think fresh air is just, you probably couldn't be better. Think about it for a stressful or a challenging situation. Is just, I use the analogy, I suppose, or I think of it myself in terms of pre-game, you know, if you're talking sporting reference, pre-game, in-game, post-game. So pre-game, just being, okay, let me prepare as well as I can. Let me make sure I've the right environment around me. I've got what I need in front of me. And also prepare, you know, I know that, right, this is going to be challenging, and that's fine. That's just the nature of what it has to be. And then secondly, you know, you're in the situation. So you've got, what are my sort of tools in that moment? You know, is it my breath? Is it reminding myself just to take an extra breath before I speak, not to jump in? Sometimes it's a physical cue. So it could be literally something on your wrist, say, that you can pull if you feel yourself getting triggered. Right. It's just a reminder just to take a breath and just try and stay calm in the moment. And then the post that event, if you like. I think fresh air is probably the best, you know, just getting out, having a decompression time, I suppose. So I think that's how it might kick into to,
Yeah.
a stressful situation.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Oh, 100%, yeah. And I'd imagine as well, to help you just get your own thinking out, because our last couple of videos have been about building habits. But the idea of just setting your alarm every 90 minutes for a couple of days might that help you just get into that into that rhythm of, oh yeah, I need to reset here.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think you're spot on. And I think some of this is it's playing with things that work.
Yeah.
So I'd be a great believer in trying things. So you might do something like that for for the rest of the week.
Yeah.
And just even make note and just try and think, God, is this helping me?
Yeah.
And you might find that, God, this is actually really making a difference. It's something very small and very simple. So I think a lot of these things, it's about playing with them and trying what works. And I think depending on where people are at with what's going on in their life, different things might be more effective. But yeah, absolutely. I think just it's a great idea. Just set the alarm on the phone every 90 minutes. It goes off. And what you'll probably find, or at least I found this, and I've seen this from talking to people, is you tend to start to plan your day a little bit more consciously aware of, so say, for example, you and I now are chatting here for, 20 minutes. I'll have 5 minutes of a break before a coaching session. So I nearly start to sort of plan that out in your day. And it's not that you have to get overly, detailed on I've got to write everything down or I'll have to go into my calendar. It just becomes a bit of a way of being, I think.
Yeah.
That makes sense. But
yeah,
I think you're right. All these things it's trying things. And I think as well, the time that we're talking, the lockdown has been extended for another 6 weeks here in Ireland. So I think it's a good, if you choose to look at it this way, it might be, okay, over the next 6 weeks, are there a couple of little habits or little things that I might like to sort of lock in or embed, for myself. So it's not a bad time to try this.
Yeah, I also think as well, the idea of naming it, which is what struck me so much about the video last week, a transition ritual. Oh yeah, now I know what that is, and to become more conscious of that stuff now means, okay, how do I start to potentially build in this stuff? And I think, look, in this little video, you've given us a couple of little, practical little ideas, tips and tools. So thanks very much, Paul. That's been great.